It's 1940. The North Atlantic is crawling with Nazi warships, hunting down supply convoys like wolves after sheep. And right in the middle of all that chaos is the HMS Jervis Bay. Not a battleship, not a destroyer, just a converted merchant vessel hauling a few guns bolted onto her deck. Basically a cargo ship playing battleship in one of the deadliest oceans on Earth. Now these convoys, with hundreds of merchant ships, were the lifeline of Britain. Food, fuel, ammo, everything the island needed to survive. If those supplies stopped, Britain would fall. But here's the crazy part. The Jervis Bay was the only escort guarding a 37-ship convoy known as HX-84. One lightly armed freighter was all that stood between Hitler's navy and a few thousand sailors' lives. And on November 5th, 1940, the impossible happened. Out of the grey Atlantic mist came a monster, the Admiral Scheer, a German pocket battleship with 11-inch guns that could tear a ship apart before it even got within range. Every man aboard the Jervis Bay knew what that meant. They were outgunned, out-armored, and out of time. The captain, Edward Fegen, didn't hesitate. He gave one order: turn toward the enemy, full speed ahead. In that single moment, everyone realized this wasn't defense anymore. It was sacrifice.
The HMS Jervis Bay begins to turn, slowly, stubbornly, toward the silhouette on the horizon. The men can now see it clearly. Admiral Scheer, a dark beast slicing through the Atlantic waves, its massive guns already swiveling into position. Inside the convoy, panic spreads. Merchant ships start scattering in all directions like frightened fish. Their only hope? That Jervis Bay can somehow keep the German battleship busy long enough for them to escape. But the crew aboard Jervis Bay, they know what's coming. Her guns? 6 inches, barely enough to dent Scheer's armor. Her hull? Thin. Her speed? Laughable. Still, Captain Edward Fegen stands calmly on the bridge, his coat whipping in the cold wind. He grabs the intercom and says something that silences the entire ship. We'll draw her fire. The convoy must get clear. And that's it. No speeches, no drama, just duty. Moments later, Jervis Bay opens fire. The shells streak out, small flashes in the grey distance, barely reaching the enemy. Then comes the reply. Admiral Scheer unleashes a broadside that lights up the ocean like lightning. The first salvo hits the water nearby, sending geysers of seawater higher than the ship itself. The second salvo finds its mark, tearing through the bridge, smashing communications and wounding Captain Fegen instantly. But the ship doesn't stop. Even as flames race across her decks and men scramble through smoke and twisted metal, the crew keeps firing. Guns that can't even penetrate the Scheer's armor are blazing non-stop, because that's not the point. The point is time. Every minute Jervis Bay stays afloat means another freighter gets farther away. Another ship survives. The gunners keep firing until their mounts are destroyed. The signalmen keep trying to send messages even as explosions rip apart the masts. And up on the shattered bridge, Captain Fegen, one arm shattered, face bloodied, still refuses to abandon his post. Witnesses later said he was still shouting orders through the smoke. He knew he wasn't saving himself. He was saving everyone else. By now the Jervis Bay is burning from bow to stern. The sky above the North Atlantic glows orange with fire, and the sea itself looks like it's bleeding. Most of the ship's guns are silent, either destroyed or buried under twisted steel. But somehow she's still moving. Admiral Scheer can't believe it. The German gunners are pounding this tiny escort ship with everything they've got. High explosive shells, armor-piercing rounds, fire control lasers locked dead center, and yet Jervis Bay keeps coming. Captain Theodore Cranky, commander of Scheer, later admitted he was astonished that a single merchant cruiser dared to fight back. He expected the British ship to turn and flee. Instead, it charged. Inside the Jervis Bay, chaos reigns. Men are fighting fires with their bare hands. Others are dragging wounded crewmates through smoke-filled corridors. The deck is slick with seawater and oil. The air reeks of cordite and burning paint. And through all of it, there's one order that never changes. Keep firing. Even when the rangefinders are gone, even when the gunners can't see through the smoke, they just keep shooting. A witness from one of the fleeing convoy ships later said the Jervis Bay was a floating torch, but she kept her guns going. She didn't turn away. For 22 minutes she held the Admiral Scheer off, 22 minutes of hell on open water. Then the final hit came. A shell tore into her engine room, killing power instantly. The lights went out, and the ship began to slow, listing heavily to one side. Captain Fegen, already gravely wounded, gave one last command before being thrown against the shattered rail. "Abandon ship." Even then, some of the crew refused to leave. They kept trying to man the anti-aircraft guns, hoping to squeeze out just one more shot, as if the flames themselves weren't real. At 7 p.m., the Jervis Bay finally went under. Her guns silent, her flag still flying. As the HMS Jervis Bay slipped beneath the waves, the crew of Admiral Scheer watched in silence. Even the German sailors, trained to destroy without hesitation, stood there, staring at the burning debris scattered across the water they'd just witnessed one of the most defiant acts in naval history. And while that fiery distraction raged, convoy HX-84 disappeared into the fog. 31 out of 37 merchant ships made it out alive. Think about that. Without Jervis Bay, the Admiral Scheer could have wiped them out one by one, crippling Britain's vital supply line across the Atlantic. But because of one ship, one captain, and one impossible order, those ships lived to fight another day. Hours later, in the freezing dark, the survivors of Jervis Bay clung to lifeboats and wreckage, tossed about by the North Atlantic. The cold was merciless, men slipping away silently, their hands frozen to the ropes. Out of the entire crew of 254 men, only 68 survived. They were picked up the next day by a neutral Swedish freighter, Stureholm, whose captain risked his own ship by turning back through waters still prowled by the Germans. When the Stureholm's crew found the survivors, they described them as half-dead, covered in oil, and still gripping whatever they'd been holding when their ship went down. Captain Fegen wasn't among them. He went down with his ship, still on the bridge when the final shell hit. For his courage, he was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest military honor. But more than that, his name became a quiet legend among Allied sailors. Because the truth is, in that one hopeless battle, Jervis Bay didn't just protect a convoy. She proved that bravery alone could stand against overwhelming power. In the grand chaos of World War II, the story of HMS Jervis Bay could have easily been lost, just another ship sunk in an endless sea of tragedy. But it didn't fade. It burned its name into naval history, like a beacon that refused to die out. Across the Atlantic convoys, sailors began whispering her story. They spoke of a merchant ship that went toe-to-toe with a German battleship, of a captain who charged into certain death without a second thought. For the men who still had to cross those same deadly waters, Jervis Bay became more than a name. She was a reminder of what courage really looked like. After the war, when survivors reunited, they described Captain Fegen not as a man obsessed with duty, but as someone who carried it like faith. He'd once said to a fellow officer, "If my ship ever comes under fire, I'll never turn away." And he didn't. His Victoria Cross citation summed it up perfectly. For valor in facing hopeless odds and continuing the fight until his ship was lost. Even German sailors respected him. Captain Kranke of the Admiral Scheer later admitted that he had never seen such bravery, calling the British ship's stand one of the most gallant actions of the war. Today, the name Jervis Bay lives on, not just in history books, but on the hulls of modern Royal Navy ships, carrying her legacy forward. Her story is a stark reminder. Sometimes, victory isn't about surviving. Sometimes, it's about standing your ground, long enough to make sure others do, because in that cold Atlantic night, when every man aboard knew death was certain, they fought anyway. And in doing so, they didn't just save a convoy. They defined what it meant to be human.